Good evening, I'm Ian Hannamansing. Tonight, raw grief and pain across the country after a BC First Nation reports a terrible discovery.
Nobody believed anybody. Nobody believed the people here.
Tonight, mourning with residential school survivors. What's next? And the tributes across the country. Also tonight, Manitoba breaks a one-day record for ICU admissions as some healthcare workers combat COVID denial in their patients.
No, this is not COVID. This is something else.
The move to change how you can bet on sports.
We are all well behind the rest of the world.
We explore new legislation and why it could change more than just how you gamble.
How big a part of the CFL's future is gambling?
It could be something that, dare I say, could save the league.
Plus, getting into the holiday spirit, celebrating Christmas and easing COVID restrictions. This is The National. Right across the country tonight, memorials are growing, as is the demand for accountability after a disturbing discovery at the site of a former residential school in BC. An underground scan of the former Kamloops Indian residential school grounds detected the remains of 215 children buried there. The news late last week sparked outrage and an outpouring of grief that has now spread well beyond Kamloops. And in that community, it runs deep. As Briar Stewart shows us, it's a discovery that's incredibly personal for many there.
As the sun sets, a gathering rooted in grief for the children who attended the Kamloops residential school and never made it home. Marie Narcisse went there, so did her older siblings and parents.
And it seemed as though nobody believed anybody. Nobody believed the people here. The children, the kids. Can you imagine how horrific it was to watch somebody die and you don't even know why?
At times, this century-old building housed Canada's largest residential school, part of a horrific legacy, now even darker. Official records list 50 children who died at the school, but this new discovery suggests that number is dramatically low.
We're all grieving, and we all, are putting our place into the place of, the parents, the mothers, and, we appreciate the national outcry, but, duly noting that this is still preliminary.
The Kamloops Tishaquekpik First Nation says a team using ground-penetrating radar found the remains of at least 215 children. They're awaiting the final report, but there are conversations about what might happen next.
Perhaps have a look at other residential schools to see and understand that perhaps this isn't the only situation where there are mass graves or graves.
The Royal BC Museum and Archives will consult historical records for the Kamloops School. Children were sent here from across the province and beyond. With the world watching, officials are asking for more accountability from the federal government.
And it's about how and why. And there's so many unanswered questions that our membership wants. The world wants to know.
For Narcisse, the news is a painful reminder of her own story and those of her loved ones.
Today it's so hard for people to come here. And it just brought back more memories.
Briar, you mentioned the final report has yet to come. What could happen next?
Well, Ian, we understand that the BC coroner is engaged in this process, and the regional chief for the Assembly of First Nations says it is possible that down the road the community will want to try to identify the children and have them return to their home communities. But speaking with officials from the First Nation today, it really seems that that's a premature discussion because, as you mentioned, the report, they're still awaiting the final report. And also they're trying to have a meeting this week with community members here to brief them. And I should say that many of the members have been gathering through the weekend here at the memorial and last night for a drum circle. And they'll be gathering again tonight to honor the children and to do some ceremony. Ian.
Briar Stewart in Kamloops this evening. At a memorial last week, 215 pairs of children's shoes were placed on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery. That tribute, along with others, is now spreading. In Ganawage, just south of Montreal, a march was held today to honor the lives lost. Nearby, hundreds of shoes sat in front of the Catholic Church. So did Gagayansta Deer.
I am a residential school survivor, and I have suffered every day of my life, knowing that this has happened to me.
She said today's memorial was important to bring the story out into the open.
Today, when we honor them by remembering them and acknowledging that they were alive.
In Edmonton, more shoes placed in the Alberta legislature ahead of a candlelight vigil held tonight. And in Ottawa, the tribute of shoes and stuffed animals circled the Centennial Flame. In the background, the flag on the Peace Tower flew at half-mast, as it will on all federal buildings until further notice. We know this story can be traumatizing for many people, and support is available. The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is there to help former students 24 hours a day. And the Hope for Wellness Helpline offers counseling and crisis intervention for Indigenous people across the country in Cree, Ojibwe, Inuktitut, English, and French. Indigenous people have had a troubled history with the RCMP, and tonight we have exclusive new information about the force and its stated goal of hiring more Indigenous officers. As Rafi Boudjikanian shows us, they can't keep many already hired.
I enjoy the job that I was doing.
But Carrie McKee also says there was a flip side.
There was a lot of me being called a There was me being uneducated.
Insults colleagues threw at the Cree woman from Montreal Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. McKee says when she called for backup, it often arrived late or not at all, even on dangerous calls. During one incident, a suspect tried to steal her police car and gun.
I ended up having a broken voice box and had a really good black eye.
I'm Jennifer Olfert from the Shuswap First Nation.
The Mounties aren't shy about showing off Indigenous officers in recruitment ads, but the numbers show they're having a hard time keeping them. More than 100 Indigenous officers have left the RCMP over the past 3 years.
Numbers taking humor in the term prairie.
We're protecting the identity of this retired Indigenous officer. He says managers must no longer ignore racist behavior.
It has to be addressed. Does it get worse? Does it continue?
And if you don't trust the system, they don't want to be part of it.
This observer says episodes like these don't help. The beating of Athabasca Chippewa First Nation Chief Alan Adam by officers last year, or the shooting of Chantal Moore in New Brunswick.
Just one incident can take things back 20, 30 years in terms of trust building.
The RCMP says most officers make it to retirement, but admits it has no specifics about why Indigenous officers leave.
There may in fact be some systemic issues that are resulting in folks making the decision to move on.
The RCMP has a goal to increase Indigenous hiring, but no real targets. Last year, the number of applicants recruited into training dropped by nearly 50%. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Let's turn to the latest on COVID now. While the third wave is receding in much of the country, that is not the case for Manitoba. The province continues to be crushed by the pandemic. Today marking another brutal milestone. A record 17 people were admitted to ICU in the last 24 hours. There are now 106 Manitobans with COVID in ICU, including 32 who are being treated out of province. Manitoba's ICUs have seen nearly 5 times more COVID patients in May than in April. Public health officials have always said vaccinations are the key to ending the pandemic, but some parts of Manitoba are still seeing a lot of reluctance, even when people turn up sick. Austin Grabish looks at why.
Undeterred by public health measures banning indoor church services, these parishioners gathered this morning as their pastor spoke against COVID restrictions.
Never thought we would come to times like these in Canada.
Some here still believe COVID is a hoax, even after getting it.
There have been a few patients that, even at death's door and on their deathbeds, are in denial.
Dr. Ganesan Abu works at the City of Winkler's Hospital. The facility has had so many COVID patients on ventilators, it's experienced a shortage of oxygen.
There's this idea that we are somehow colluding with a conspiracy that this virus is not real.
The makeup of the community is one that is self-reliant and believe that the less involvement you have with the government, the better off you are.
Manitoba's vaccination rate is almost 65%, but just a quarter of people in Winkler have had a shot. It's even lower in the rural municipality of Stanley at 13%. As the ICU crisis escalates, military lab techs have started their deployment. Ambulance services and the armed forces are continuing to fly critically ill patients out of the province. This doctor is one of a few who called on the government to bring in a stay-at-home order this week. She's critical of how things got to this point.
With the kind of second wave that we had and this delayed onset, as you point out, of the third wave, how could we have delayed action?
Manitoba has ramped up its weekday vaccination significantly. But now another hurdle. The province won't meet its target of getting first doses into at least 70% of the population by June 9th. Officials say the reason, another shortage of Moderna doses combined with decreased demand. Austin Grabish, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Ontario is getting a new Chief Medical Officer of Health. Dr. Kieran Moore is head of a public health unit in the Kingston area, and he's been praised for his handling of the pandemic in that region.
Now we have to ask you to really stick with that household bubble in this area, and really all we're doing when we do that is keeping the contacts low, not allowing the virus to spread from person to person.
All right, well, that's obviously the wrong clip. That is from Newfoundland, where they are revealing that there has been a new cluster of COVID cases in Western Newfoundland and Labrador, and tougher public health measures have been announced for the region. All right, we'll go back to that story about the new public health officer in Ontario, and that officer is Dr. Kieran Moore. As I mentioned earlier, he has been praised for his handling of the pandemic in that region.
He's like the Wayne Gretzky of public health. He sees where the puck is going.
And he'll replace Dr. David Williams, who's retiring next month. Williams has faced criticism over his communication style. The move comes as the province gets ready to ease restrictions. Ontario received permission this weekend from Health Canada to extend the expiry date on tens of thousands of doses of AstraZeneca vaccine, a decision the federal health minister defended today.
They are considered gold standard regulators in the world. They are very, very thorough, and I have full confidence in the regulatory team to do the due diligence. They haven't hesitated to hold back, for example, product that doesn't meet their requirements.
The doses were going to expire on Tuesday, but Ontario can now use them until July the 1st. Well, let's bring in Dr. Lenore Saxinger, an infectious disease specialist in Edmonton. And so first of all, what's changed here, Dr. Saxinger? How could vaccines that we thought were going to expire tomorrow actually be good for another 30 days?
Well, although it seems like a very 11th hour change, it's my understanding that Health Canada actually got updated stability data on Thursday, the 27th. That was submitted from AstraZeneca and actually confirmed that those lots have basically are unchanged in terms of quality and content over the time period. And so I think that we should expect that this could happen again, because with updated data, they might be able to extend some deadlines and allow us to use up available stocks, which is a good thing, actually.
So based on what you've seen, do you have concerns about an increased health risk with this extension?
Oh, absolutely not, because if there was any suggestion that the product had changed in any way, they wouldn't have actually given an extended expiry date. And this is something that I think has occurred with other vaccines and products as well, because this is a new product, and they're going to continue doing stability testing on some of the, on the lots as they go through. So I think that we're going to see this kind of shifting potentially with other vaccines over time as well.
All right, Dr. Saxinger, thank you.
Thank you.
Canada-wide, a combination of restrictions and vaccinations has been effective at pushing back the third wave. But the fight isn't over. A year ago, Canada was just coming off the first wave of COVID with an average of more than 800 cases daily. Now, even with this third wave receding, the country's still averaging 2,800 daily new cases, and the stress on hospitals remains high, with about 1,000 COVID patients in ICU. That means the vaccination effort is as important as ever. 56% of the Canadian population has received at least one dose. The population fully vaccinated with 2 doses, still just 5%. But across the country, there are reopening plans in place, and Talia Ricci shows us in some provinces, the shift is already underway.
Lately, sunny days are feeling that much brighter.
It's nice that it's at least nice out and the restrictions are finally lifting, and then that just means you can see your family and friends more.
As of today in Saskatchewan, up to 10 people are allowed at private gatherings. Outdoor sports and indoor fitness classes start back up too. Next door, Albertans are preparing to enter stage 1 of their plan Tuesday, when outdoor patio dining can resume with 4 people from the same household, and restrictions will ease around retail and worship services. This week, scenes of normalcy in BC, as indoor dining and outdoor team sports restarted. In Ontario, teens and tweens lined up to get their first dose.
As soon as it was 12 and up, I really wanted to go out and get the vaccine. I want to make sure that everyone gets to live long on this beautiful planet, you know.
Tomorrow, those 80 and older can start signing up for their second dose. And volunteer drivers are getting ready to help.
Our phones have been ringing off the hook.
Ontario's stay-at-home order is set to expire Wednesday, with more restrictions lifting in the coming weeks. But the province has extended its ban on interprovincial travel, which affects land borders with Manitoba and Quebec until mid-June. PEI is keeping borders shut too. In an interview on Rosemary Barton Live, the Premier defended keeping quarantine rules in place for travelers from outside Atlantic Canada until August.
It's not a race for us here. The only race for us is against COVID and its variants, and that's the race we're trying to win.
He also said he's been lobbying other premiers to figure out a vaccine certification program for cross-provincial border travelers.
We want to get people rolling again.
While any of these plans across the country could change based on COVID rates and the vaccine rollout,
in general, I think our summer of 2021 is going to be a lot better than the summer of 2020.
as a finish line for this pandemic finally appears on the not-too-distant horizon. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
In Quebec, a relaxation of COVID rules came just as the Habs won a key playoff game in dramatic fashion. And as Matt Demore shows us, for Montrealers, there's been a lot to celebrate this weekend.
Chance cut, Kanyubi scores!
At the limited capacity Bell Centre, the first Canadian NHL crowd in almost 15 months celebrates victory. And it wasn't the only place things got loud. Streets erupted throughout Montreal after the Canadiens' game-winning goal in overtime, including the patio outside McLean's pub downtown.
Everybody was really just happy to be out, happy to see other people, happy to celebrate the game, myself included. I stuck around after my shift and watched the game with everybody, and it's not the same as watching a game at home, that's for sure.
Outdoor patios got the green light to open in Quebec Friday, the same day the province lifted the 9:30 p.m. curfew. McLean's pub has been closed since last September. Now, the owners say the summer season will be key for business.
It's just incredible. I mean, it feels like, a bit of normal is back, and with the Canadiens being in the playoffs, it's just an icing on the cake.
Tomorrow, restaurant dining rooms and gyms reopen in many parts of Quebec. But for some areas like Montreal, the action stays on patios for at least another week as health officials keep tabs on the COVID situation. Montreal fans will be keeping close tabs on Game 7 with the Maple Leafs tomorrow night in Toronto.
We got a great goalie, they got a really great team, but we know at the end result what happens when Montreal plays Toronto. We win, and that's the end of it.
Optimism for what happens on the ice as Quebecers see a light at the end of the COVID tunnel. Matt Damoul, CBC News, Montreal.
The largest sports event in the world since the pandemic began was held this weekend in Indianapolis. 135,000 fans watched the Indy 500.
Start your engines!
This year, thanks to vaccinations and declining infections, crowds were allowed at 40% capacity. 2 Canadian drivers were among the competitors, but the winner today, Brazilian driver Helio Castroneves. Fans could soon have a new way to engage in sports that's long been illegal in Canada, gambling on a single game.
A lot of the betting in the future is going to be during the game, almost like a fluid market throughout the game.
We explored the repercussions of legislation that could be a game changer. Plus, the British Prime Minister is lobbying G7 countries to agree on vaccine passports.
What we need, I think, is a global treaty on pandemic preparedness.
Boris Johnson in a Canadian exclusive before he hosts the next summit. And a Saskatchewan family has had the Christmas tree up, the presents wrapped, waiting to celebrate. Today's the day. Police in Ontario have released surveillance video of the person they say opened fire inside a Mississauga restaurant last night, killing one person and injuring 4 more. You can see the person wearing a mask before entering the restaurant and then again running away. In the moments between, police say the restaurant's owner, his wife, and his 2 sons were shot, along with another employee. One of the sons was killed, and police are appealing to the public for information. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to take his first international trip since the pandemic began to the G7 summit in the UK next month. On the agenda, figuring out how the rest of us can travel safely internationally and a plan to end the pandemic. In a Canadian exclusive interview with our chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton, Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the UK lays out what he's looking to achieve.
All passengers. As parts of this country and the world start to slowly reopen, the prospect of being able to travel again is becoming real. And with it, a need for a coordinated approach to international travel. G7 countries have been talking about what that might look like, and the UK Prime Minister says that must be part of the upcoming meeting.
So there has to be some sort of agreement then at the G7 level to start on how travel is and vaccine passports.
What we need, I think, is a global treaty on pandemic preparedness.
On that, Justin Trudeau and Boris Johnson are on the same page. But the meeting will also include a discussion on whether all vaccines will be acceptable for travel or only ones approved within the G7. Beyond passports, Johnson also wants leaders to put the world on better footing for future pandemics by improving surveillance and more reliable supply chains for much-needed personal protective equipment. More coordination might also be needed, says Johnson, on standards for lockdowns and quarantines on a global scale. But before that, more must be done to share vaccines with the world. The UK has, like Canada, donated to the COVAX vaccine sharing initiative, but like Canada, is being called on to do more. And Johnson says all leaders want to move faster.
What we want the G7 to try to agree is that instead of vaccinating the whole world by 2024 or 2025, which is the current timetable, we need to get this done by the end of next year.
In recent days, Johnson himself has faced blistering accusations by one of his former aides for his handling of the pandemic.
The Prime Minister regarded this as just a scare story. He described it as the new swine flu.
More than 152,000 people died in the United Kingdom due to COVID. More than 70% of people there now have been vaccinated with one dose, and the country has loosened restrictions. Johnson deflects his own criticism by saying all governments were faced with the difficult decisions around lockdowns.
We did everything we could to minimize casualties, to save life and to protect our national health service. And you know what? I think that's what governments around the world tried to do, with very, very few exceptions.
The pandemic will clearly be top of the agenda at the G7 meeting Johnson will host in less than 2 weeks. It's expected to be the first time these leaders have met in person in 2 years. Rosemary Barton, CBC News, Ottawa.
In Israel today, a political shakeup just weeks after a ceasefire between that country's forces and Hamas. Tonight, Benjamin Netanyahu is clinging to his role as Israeli Prime Minister. Stephen D'Souza takes us through the political power plays and the potential repercussion on the future of the country's relationship with Palestinians.
Benjamin Netanyahu has dominated Israeli politics for decades, as Prime Minister for the last 12 years. So word his time may be ending is not welcome among supporters in Jerusalem.
If he's going to go now, we're going to miss him a lot.
Waiting in the wings, Naftali Bennett, once Netanyahu's chief of staff. His shot at the top job comes after 4 elections in just over 2 years failed to yield a decisive result. The choice is now, he said Sunday, a 5th election or a unity government. Unity between opposing viewpoints. Bennett, a right-wing nationalist, has agreed to join with former TV anchor turned centrist politician Yair Lapid. They would take turns serving 2 years each as prime minister. But Netanyahu isn't giving up, painting the broad coalition as left-wing, calling it a danger to Israel's security and future.
There are still so many things that can go wrong.
Experts say don't count Netanyahu out just yet.
It's been 12 years. There have been many opportunities along the way where Netanyahu might have lost power. Every time he has managed to squeak by.
If the coalition is successful, Bennett would be the most right-wing politician to lead the country. He supports annexing Palestinian territory and is firmly against a two-state solution, though it's not clear if his agenda will go anywhere.
What we don't know is how much any one party will be able to get its way, considering that it's got coalition partners who are ideologically quite opposed.
The coalition could include, for the first time in Israeli history, an Arab-Israeli party, but Arab voters aren't expecting much change. I don't see anyone who will do anything for Arabs, this woman tells us.
The process of firming up the coalition could take a week, and in the tumultuous world of Israeli politics, that's a lifetime in which anything could happen. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Jerusalem.
For Canadian sports fans, betting on a single game has long been illegal, but that could soon change.
You could be sitting at your seat,
with your phone out, using that app, betting on the next play.
How the government and sports leagues hope to capitalize on the billions of dollars circulating on out-of-country betting sites. Plus,
I'll leave it right here for you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I appreciate it.
a group of volunteers hop on their bikes to lend a helping hand in a time of need. Stay with us. Welcome back. Sports gambling is already a big business, but the rules for placing those bets in this country are rigid for now. But a proposed change in legislation could bring in significant tax revenue and even have an impact on Canadian sports leagues. Jamie Strachan explains.
This is what sports betting in Canada looks like in most places. You pick up your Pro Line or your Sports Select ticket and you make your picks. But to play, you have to pick multiple games, better known as a parlay. And to win, all of those games have to be correct.
That appeals to a lot of people.
But the odds are long.
They're long.
If anybody knows about picking winners, it's Rob Pizzola. For him, betting on sports is a full-time job, and he doesn't like the betting options available in Canada.
And you're not really getting a fair price on these parlays in general. So not only do you have to have the luck of sequencing these all correctly and winning this combination, you're probably not even getting paid out fair value on them.
Shrewd gamblers like Pizzola, or even casual ones looking for real choice and fair payouts, aren't placing their bets in Canada. Many Canadians are betting through dozens of offshore sports books. I can bet on any single game being played anywhere, even who the next US president will be. These sites are big business, usually housed in tax havens like Malta or the Isle of Man. The Canadian Gaming Association says Canadians bet $4 billion on these foreign sites every year, plus another $10 billion with illegal bookmaking operations in Canada. Those provincial sports lotteries, only $500 million.
The prohibition on single event sport betting is one where we are all well behind the rest of the world, including our neighbors to the south.
Conservative MP Kevin Waugh wants to keep that money in Canada and make it legal.
Bill C-218, an act to amend the criminal code, sports betting, be now read a third time and do pass.
The Saskatchewan politician sponsored a bill that just made it through the House of Commons and is sitting in the Senate. It would let Canadians pick just one winner on those provincial lottery tickets.
It's hard enough to predict one game. I can't predict 2 and 3 and 4 games out of Proline, so we're missing that opportunity in this country. And all we're doing here with this legislation that has come through the House of Commons, we're giving people an option. And today, people want to be entertained. They would like to bet on pro sports.
If you want to know more about anything to do with sports gambling, you go to Las Vegas. That's where I connected with a lawyer who specializes in the industry.
Why does single game betting matter so much?
With any betting product, the first question you're always thinking about is how intuitive is this going to be to the bettor? How intuitive is it going to be to a consumer? Is it something they're going to easily understand, digest, and then be able to execute? And the reality is that single game is that product for sports betting.
Waugh's bill in Canada is part of a seismic shift in the North American sports betting landscape that's easily visible just by watching a hockey game. Sports gambling websites and casinos, once shunned by professional sports, are now embraced. Welcome to advertise next to donuts and soft drinks. The NHL actually led the way on this. First, they put a team in Las Vegas, and then they did this.
Today, the NHL and MGM are proud to announce that we've entered into a multi-year partnership that designates MGM as an official gaming partner of the NHL.
For years, if you wanted to make a sports bet in the United States, you had to physically be in a Las Vegas casino. In 2018, a court decision made sports betting possible everywhere. Half of the states now offer Americans legalized sports betting. To find out how this changed the game, I connected with one of America's leading sports gambling gurus.
Can you talk a little bit about how quickly this is all evolving?
It has been a whirlwind.
David Purdom says leagues have been scrambling to be sure they don't miss out on this bonanza, providing gamblers with all the tools they need to optimize the betting experience.
Second down and 3.
Things like betting if a quarterback will complete the next pass, how long a player will be on the ice during a game, or if a golfer will make their next putt.
A lot of the betting in the future is going to be during the game, almost like a fluid market throughout the game. Over in the UK already, more money is bet during a soccer match than is bet before it. New generation is going to be playing and betting throughout games. And to do that, they got to have the quick, reliable data. And the people that have that are the leagues.
One league watching this very closely is the CFL. The league didn't play last season, and the coming season remains in doubt. How big a part of the CFL's future is gambling?
It could be something that, dare I say, could save the league.
CFL insider Justin Dunk says for a league in perpetual financial turmoil, embracing gambling makes sense.
So from what I've been told at the CFL level, there's in development of an in-game app, right? So that the league could actually monetize and the teams could monetize that app. So you could be sitting at your seat with your phone out, using that app, betting on the next play. And that could overall help your revenue for people that are in the crowd, but you could also be doing that at home on the very same app.
Rob Pizzola predicts legal single-game betting in Canada will set off a frenzy similar to the American experience.
Like, it will blow up.
Sportsbooks will jockey for a slice of the Canadian market, paying licensing fees and taxes to operate here. Provincial lotteries will have to offer better odds and more options if they want to remain in the game.
It's just another alternative form of wagering that doesn't exist right now. And when you add that to the other arsenal, which includes parlays, then now you have this full complement and at least makes things a little bit more interesting.
So, Jamie, why were Canadians not allowed to bet on individual games?
Really a question of integrity, Ian. The thought being it's much easier to influence the outcome of one game than it would to be to deal with two or three. Also, players making a lot more money these days, so really that's not an issue when it comes to influencing the outcome of games. And Canada was an outlier on this file. Single game betting allowed in many European markets and now in many states south of the border.
So presumably this puts more gambling options in front of Canadians and worries about problem gambling.
The hope is that this bill will keep a lot of the money that Canadians are already gambling here in Canada, and that a lot of that money will be available to deal with things like gambling addiction and problem gamblers.
All right, Jamie, thank you.
Thank you.
Whether it's watching sports together or celebrating the holidays, it's a moment many Canadians have been waiting for. With restrictions lifting in time for the summer, what better time to celebrate Christmas? But first,
I'm away from my family and I miss them so much.
a bike brigade delivers more than just food to those who have been living in isolation for months. Stay with us. From lost jobs to isolation to fear, this pandemic has created a lot of hardships. It's also introduced us to a lot of helpers, neighbors reaching out to neighbors to get through this, like the Bike Brigade in Toronto. Nick Purdon shows us how hundreds of volunteers are making a difference.
Hey, Lenrick.
Hey.
Okay, we've got one large for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
People need help, and you can't help them staying at home. You can't help them behind a keyboard. You can't help them just sitting on your couch.
There you go. Awesome. Have a good ride.
Thanks so much.
Lanrick Bennett Jr. is a member of something called the Bike Brigade, a volunteer group that crisscrosses the city 7 days a week. It started because of the pandemic.
When you know that your time and effort can be better spent helping other people, how can you say no? Like, how can you?
How are you today?
Good, thanks. How you doing?
The Bike Brigade works as a go-between. They pick up food from food banks and other agencies and bring it to people who, because of COVID, can't get it themselves.
Hi, nice to see you. Ride safe.
Instead of staying home when the pandemic started, these are the people who did the opposite. They went out to help. Carrie Shear has been with the Bike Brigade since the beginning.
So my first ride for the brigade was April 4th of 2020, and I remember that because it was 3 days after my parents tested positive for COVID-19. Those early days were so scary, they were so paralyzing, and I needed to do something with that paralyzing fear.
What Carrie did was push back against it. She forced herself to do something more than worrying about her parents.
I wanted to do something to feel like I had a little bit of control. I'm just kind of like sitting at home and seeing the scary numbers and seeing the events unfolding. I felt like there had to be something that I could do to kind of help out.
Look, I've got lots of bags. What do we need?
So I signed up for the brigade and I was on a ride 3 days later.
Carrie has done hundreds of rides since. Getting on her bike and making deliveries has gotten her through the pandemic.
It's lessened a lot of the fear that I have around COVID, knowing that my community is here for me and that I can be here for the community. And it's been really good for my sense of humanity and my hope.
One large.
The Bike Brigade has grown so much since the start of the pandemic, they now have 900 volunteers, each with their own reason for joining.
Have a good ride. So you can do that while you're waiting. Oh, perfect. Okay, cool.
Danielle Gritzty is a rider and a mechanic here. She joined because she was close to needing help herself.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I was basically heartbroken because I lost my job that I was about to start, and I got let go from the job that I had been working.
We don't happen to have any like pedal wrenches, do we?
Oh, Danielle will.
Yeah?
Danielle got CERB and was able to make ends meet. And then she decided to help others.
Like nobody ever asked us for tools, but you're here. I swear I didn't jinx it.
I joined the Bike Brigade because it seemed like they were doing something that if I wasn't so lucky, I might need someone to deliver food to my door. And so I thought that it was important enough for me to get out there and just get on my bike.
It feels like these threads are stripped, my friend.
There was one drop I did where someone needed just like a sweater and a bottle of laundry detergent dropped to their house. And it brought a little bit of a purpose to my day. So even though I was doing something small and even though I'm not the fastest rider or the strongest one, I still could do something.
So you know what? Let's give your chain some oil. Okay.
That the Bike Brigade has helped Danielle is a positive. But of course, the most important thing they do is deliver food. Lanrick Bennett Jr.'s Day continues here at the St. Jamestown Community Co-op.
I'm gonna just thank you so much.
A downtown food program that the Bike Brigade has helped keep going.
Here you go.
Thank you so much. I've got it.
Lanrick picks up a food box for a senior who lives on her own.
Thanks, ladies.
I'm carrying precious cargo. That is going to feed them, hopefully for a full week. I need to get it to them. Can't stop. Can't stop. You get to see with your own eyes where these boxes are ending up. Who the people are that need this help.
How you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
Just gonna leave it right here for you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
This is a good help for me.
No problem.
Thank you very much for delivering.
No problem.
We need that. I need that badly.
You have a good night, okay?
Good night. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Trini Fillon is 70 and lives on a fixed income.
I've been in isolation since the pandemic starts last year, March. And it's not easy for me living alone because you are limited to yourself. And you feel unhappy because I'm away from my family and I miss them so much.
Trini says her rent is so high that buying fresh food is often difficult.
We hope for that.
But she tells me it's not just the food that's in the box, it's that someone delivered it to her.
It's very, very, very appreciative. At least I am important in the way that somebody is supplying my immediate needs rather than for me worrying. It's an unspeakable joy, really.
The pandemic might have created the bike brigade, but Lanrick wants me to know that it's here to stay.
I won't stop. I want to make sure that I'm here to see us help as many people as possible in every way and every situation. The most vulnerable of us need our help, and I can't say no to that. I won't say no.
Hey, how's it going? Long time no see.
The pandemic has hurt everybody, but it's also brought out the best in us too. Nick Purdon, CBC News, Toronto.
This weekend, many Canadians are remembering actor and broadcaster Paul Soles, who has died at the age of 90. Prominent for decades on CBC Television, he was widely known for this. In the 60s, Soles was the voice of Spider-Man.
Hold on a second. We'll have a showdown to prove which of us is the real Spider-Man.
And a misfit elf in a classic Christmas special, a role fans cherished for decades.
So what? It's only a hobby.
He hosted a late-night talk show. Yeah, Letterman was his guest. And was co-host of Take 30, seen here with future Governor General Adrian Clarkson. Fellow actors from the Stratford stage to an award-winning role online remember him today for his warmth.
The fact is that everybody knows that the mind, if it's alive at all, is still feels it's about 25 or 30.
Looks like Sunday is going to be our first chance to get everybody together.
For one Regina family, Christmas is coming early this year, or actually late. It all depends on how you look at it. Grandparents Russ and Marla Barr have had their house decked out since December, but it wasn't until today that Saskatchewan's reopening plan allowed for gatherings of up to 10 people. Tonight's moment, time to get this party started.
And this is the Christmas ornament we have for years.
We weren't expecting the end of May for that to be the time. We were thinking maybe a month or two at that time at the very most, but here we are.
My granddaughters decorated the whole tree.
I feel that this needs to be done right now for our own emotional well-being. Yeah, my kids need to be with their grandparents. We just need all to be together.
They're going to be pretty excited to come on Sunday to get their presents and have their Christmas dinner. Hi! How are you? It's so good to have you here.
We don't even know what we bought anymore, so it's really going to be a surprise for everybody.
To tell you the truth, I don't
Some things we forgot.
Everything.
So a couple of thoughts. First of all, I think a really nice gesture. Secondly, I hope that tree is artificial. I assume it is. And the kids, by the way, brought presents for their grandparents. Crossword puzzles, I think, jigsaw puzzles, things that they can use to while away the time until things are finally back to normal in Saskatchewan. That is the National for May 30th. Good night.